going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review, and this is our show where we review the magic stories. And it's been a while, so it's good to see you all. We don't obviously see you, but we would love to see you in the comments and etc. We would love to hear from you, but it's great to be back. We are here, as you can see from the title down below, for part 3, the final part individually of our War of the Spark Forsaken review by Greg Weisman. My quick review at the top of part 3, because this book was conveniently split into 3 parts, and we did 3 parts, a review of each part individually. Of course, this quick review doesn't count towards the whole book. Go watch our other reviews to hear quick reviews, or if we thought it wasn't appropriate for the other parts, but I think I can confidently say my quick review for part 3 is that, unfortunately, if you want to know where these characters are going into the future of Magic story, it's necessary to read it, but it is probably because of all the convoluted nonsense in it and jumping around that they do to try to appropriately retcon all the things that they have to retcon. This, I would say, is probably the weakest of the 3 parts to me, and kind of the most frustrating of the 3 parts. What about you, Amy? What were your thoughts?
A good way to summarize part 3 would just be poor characterization. Poor characterization and just poor plot, even.
Yeah, so...
Or plot management, like making the pieces fit together in a way that makes sense. That just didn't really occur.
Yeah, and we will go ahead and continue on with this review. If you have not read the story yet, or if you have, if you're going to leave comments, please feel free and give your opinions on things that we're talking about. But please realize that unless I say that it's a quote, it's not a quote. It'll be a summary or a summation of a certain part based on what we're saying. So instead of taking our word for exactly how it happens to the T, we wrote down notes for a reason to remind ourselves, but we still, of course, encourage you to read the books before you comment. But if you have not read the books yet and you're commenting, just let us know. Be like, hey, I haven't read it, but that one thing that you said is like the thing that I hate the most in stories, so I'm glad I didn't have to read that. You know, something to that effect. Whatever you feel most comfortable with, but let us know where you're coming from. Did you read it? Did you not? Etc. We would love to hear any and all opinions that you might have, because that's what we're here to do, is to review and ultimately to discuss.
Right.
So on to the full review itself. I'm going to start kind of up at the top. We're going to kind of go as best in order as we can. We may jump around just based on like stuff that's going on, but obviously spoilers, because we're reviewing the end of this book. So there was an interesting and yet unsettling chapter when the vampire member of the Triumvirate, whose name escapes me, I did not write it down, and I didn't care enough to go back and check, but there is a Triumvirate of advisors to the Orzhov, mainly advisors to Teysa Karlov, but also work with Tomek when he is the acting guildmaster. They worked with / against Kaya when she was the guildmaster. But yeah, they're mostly working with Teysa here, and are confidants of Teysa. And the vampire, there was this, again, very unsettling chapter where the vampire comes in and is talking to Tomek. I am going to mess that up. I apologize. It's Tomek, Teysa, Teo. They all get mixed up in my brain, and I apologize. Not their characterization, just their names.
Kaya and JaAR.
Kaya, JaAR, Rahl, and Rat, by the way. Oh. Holy crap, that's annoying. So yeah, anyway, I will try to do better. But yes.
Veraska and me.
Yep, there you go. Veraska and Amy. So
I just want to get mixed up with her.
Like Jace does?
No.
Nobody wants
that.
We'll
get to that.
In this book, nobody wants that, and we will get to that. So yeah, we have the vampire advisor attempting to seduce Tomek, and that chapter ends on a cliffhanger of the vampire like sexually sidling up and seducing him, and like there's a ward that Tomek is wearing that he says would protect him, and the vampire places his hand directly against it, and Tomek's like, wow, he smells good, you know, and like that's how the chapter ends. So you're like, holy crap. Like I was like, ew. Like I was a little unsettled, but not because I thought it was gross. Like it was upsetting because I was like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? Like how is this gonna go?
Okay, so
I was like,
is gonna get like completely sidetracked.
Right.
He's gonna like be under somebody's thumb.
Right.
And it's not even like somebody important. It's just like random BS.
Right. And so I was super skeeved, but it made me feel something. So that I appreciated. I appreciated having that type of like visceral reaction where I'm like, oh god, I hate this, but at the same time, like, I need to know what happens next. And so it's a cliffhanger, so I was looking forward to the next time that something happened. And then, as we will, I guess, come to find for the remainder of this book, then the book drops the ball.
Right.
In our opinion, of course. But the book totally drops the ball. Because the next time you see the advisor, he's talking to Teysa, and he says, I tried to seduce Tomek, but it didn't work because he really does love Zarek. He really does love Raw Zarek. And I'm sitting there going, okay, well, we didn't see that in the pages, so clearly something else is going to happen. This guy's lying to her, and he does have Tomek under his thumb, and now he's working against Teysa, and like...
That's what I thought.
Me too, because otherwise, my brain as a reader tells me, or a consumer of media in general, tells me we should have seen that moment, and if we didn't, there was a reason that we didn't.
Yeah.
And it's probably because it didn't happen as was stated. Now, that there is a possibility that they left that open on purpose so that way in the future they have that opening for themselves, whether they want to do it or not do it. But in this book, start to finish, that thread is never closed off. And so as far as I read it to that point, that's a fact. That Tomek loves Rahl too much and is immune to the seduction of this vampire. And if that's the case, then why didn't we see that?
Yeah.
It was such a good relationship fostered through The Gathering Storm by Django Wexler with those two characters, Tomek and Rahl. Why don't we get to see Tomek being his best self here, if you will, to coin a term for later, to be his best self in turning down the advances of this supernatural seductor in the vampire.
Because none of these characters get to be who they're supposed to be in this book. They never reach the potential of what their characters ought to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of odd structural decisions. There are a lot of odd narrative decisions. There are just a lot of odd decisions. And there is one positive, and we'll get to it, but it's really the only one that I wrote down for this bottom third.
You know what it reminds me of, this book? It reminds me of like a really big house that's got like a lot of square footage, but then like every room is so small and closed off from every other room, and it's like very oddly placed or oddly shaped.
Got it.
So that like there's no way to effectively use the space. That's what this book reminds me of.
Well, and not only that, but the inside doesn't reflect what you expect when seeing it from the outside.
Right.
Okay, that's I like that analogy a lot. Which is unfortunate because, you know, to me it feels so on the nose. We go from that choice to something that I thought was odd. Maybe it's just me. You can chime in, agree, disagree, and you can all chime in as well. That's the idea. We had an odd chapter with Veraska. And it was Veraska and like a young girl who's from Ravnica who's like playing with Veraska in like her chambers or whatever, and Veraska's calling her...
That's weird.
Yeah, well, she's calling her a princess. Like it's like similar to the girl that she came across in the streets that she let touch her and caress her. Watch the last video that we did, part 2. that was bad and not okay. But now she's here with another girl and her advisor, and then JaAR's son comes in, and they're talking about Izoni, and that Izoni sent spiders to like attack him or whatever, and so now he's here to get assistance from Vraska, even though he's JaAR's son, and Vraska is the one who overthrew his father, and is the reason why his father is turned to stone in the courtyard out there.
There's like so many convoluted directions it's meandering in that you're just like, why? Why any of this?
Now, I will say, I thought that the end of that chapter was really interesting, where you get that moment where Vraska says, you know, they're right, using spiders is a really good idea. Because Vraska made the point to JaAR's son to say, well, clearly I didn't do it, because I wouldn't send spiders. Right, I wouldn't send spiders after you. I'd use this sword, or I'd use my eyes like I did to your dad, whatever. I wouldn't send spiders. That's Izoni, the person who's trying to overtake me, so I'm her enemy, and you're now her enemy, so let's work together. And it turns out, no, Vraska sent spiders on purpose to make him think that, to be able to manipulate him. Now, we then find out that was Dovin Bond's idea, not really Vraska's, but still, that whole idea of how to get him on her side was cool. I liked that. It was interesting. I think my problem with it was we are over 2/3 of the way through this novel. And we're now being introduced in this one chapter to the girl who's, again, I didn't write down their names for a reason. We are introduced to the girl, we're introduced to the advisor, and we're introduced to JaAR's son. JaAR's son is the only one who comes up again later on in the book. The only one, and once. Presumably he's important the next time we come to Ravnica? Maybe? But it's just so weird.
Dumb.
Well, but again, as a reader, I'm sitting there going, do I have to remember these people? Because we're 2/3 of the way through the book. There's a lot of characters, of course, but if they're established characters, we know them from other stories. But these are new characters, so am I supposed to be keeping them in the back of my mind? Am I supposed to remember them or something? Because I didn't. I mean, I didn't write them down. I barely remembered that they existed, except for JaAR's son, because that was such an interesting story point to me. And then it kind of existed because he spoke for the Golgari when Vraska was stating her facts about killing Dovin Bond. Like, it's very weird. And it really does scream of, hey, next time we're on Ravnica, and we'll get back to that with Tezzeret and Lazav later, but next time we're on Ravnica, this might come up, so you better remember it. And I gotta tell you, I don't know about you all, but I'm pretty sure I know about you all. It should be a damn long time before we're back on Ravnica.
Hell yeah. And not only that, but most people aren't even reading this book because they've already decided it's terrible before they've begun.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that later too. But
how can there be so many loose ends at the end of this book to tie into something new if nobody's going to read this book?
Yep.
Then even the people who did read this book are still going to be sitting there going, I forgot. And the people who didn't read this book are going to be sitting there going, well, I guess I can't read the new book either.
Yeah, because it immediately follows, or you need to have understood. Yeah.
The older book that they didn't read.
Now, I mean, to be fair, we all had to read the original War of the Spark without having read The Gathering Storm because that's what we were forced to do. But, you know, I guess that'll be different somehow. Anyway, after that weird chapter where I thought it was odd that they introduced a million different characters, but they had that interesting narrative beat.
You think it's an interesting narrative beat. I think it's poor characterization. Because I don't see Vraska doing that. Well,
she did it for Bond because they're trying to make Vraska a villain again.
Yeah. Which is pissing me off.
She worked for Bolus, and then she justified her actions of killing Isperia, and so you can kind of give her a pass, but now she's working with Dovin Bond, but she's not working with Dovin Bond because now soon she's seemingly going to be working for Lazav. So, but they're all villains. They're all villains. Bolus, Dovin, and Lazav. They're just all bad guys, and Vraska's like, well, I'll work with this one, well, I'll work with this one, well, I'll work with this one. And there's only so many times that you can say, but I'm only doing it because I care about the Golgari.
Right.
Like, there's a certain point where that doesn't work anymore, Veraska and or writers of this story.
Right.
Like,
it's really the second one,
right,
because it's definitely not the first one.
right. But that's why I'm saying they're just making her a villain again.
Right.
They're doing that, and we will get back to that.
Sorry.
No, you're not. In fact, we're going to get back to it technically right now, because we're talking, at least to a degree, because we're talking about chapter 49. I'm going to call it out specifically because I wrote it down, because my God, this chapter was god-awful. It was Jace's perspective this chapter was being told from. And it's Veraska and Jace, and they're talking about the fact that Veraska and the others were sent out on these assassination missions. And so that's when Jace finds out that Liliana has a target on her head, right? Has a bounty or whatever you want to call it, and Kaya is going after her. And Veraska and Jace are talking about how this is hard for Jace, because Jace still has feelings for her. And Veraska is the one who is saying, I know this is hard for you because you still love her, she's someone that you still love. This is Jace's current lover.
Veraska would never say that.
Because, again, this is part of the retconning. It has to be. But this is part of the retconning. Veraska saw, in Jace's memories returning to him after the blow to the head on Ixalan, Veraska was there in the memories that Jace was projecting through his crazy telepathy going nuts, like his super powerful telepathy kind of blasting in all different directions and him not being able to control it. Veraska was in the memories where Liliana was abusing him and manipulating him. She saw them all. And they connected because she is also an abuse victim and a victim of manipulation. And so, no damn chance are you going to have Veraska saying to Jace, well, I know this is hard for you because you still love her. No! She, if anything, would be reminding him, like, yes, you may feel weird about it, but don't forget all the things that she did to you.
Right.
She did this, and she did this, and she's not worth it. And we're together now. But again, if they're trying to make Veraska the villain, and they're trying to leave Jace and Liliana as a little bit still open, because they want Liliana still as a character, they want Jace still as the face of the company, they're leaving it open on purpose while attempting to retcon Liliana entirely and the relationship of Veraska and Jace entirely.
But then they still spend all that time talking about the weirdness of the touchy-feely sex that they have, even though they're abuse victims.
They being Veraska and Jace, yes. Yep. And we talked about it in the last video. Like I said, go watch it.
Gross.
But Veraska had a very large aversion to being touched. Literally the last time that we saw her. And arguably, it would be worse now, because when Jace took her memories and sealed them, which some random new
douchebag
character, bug character, or crawl, that's the word I was looking for, crawl minion on Ravnica would not have been able to reverse. Still sticking by that.
Randomly did.
No, absolutely not. Not when it was supposed to fool Nicol Bolas. No random crawl on Ravnica would have been able to reverse it. Sorry. Can't convince me otherwise. Well, sorry. That's not fair. I'm not that guy. If you feel like you have an answer, I would love to hear it.
Me too.
But it's a tough sell, in my opinion.
The answer is retconning supreme.
Right. But I will say that when Jace took away her memories of her time on Ixalan, it means that she would have, even worse, not been okay with being touched.
Right.
It's worse than before. And then, yes, her memories got unlocked by the crawl, because that's what we have to go with, because that's what happened. But that doesn't mean she's okay with little girls stroking her tentacles and Jace, like,
that's just
often.
That was just gross to begin with.
Yeah. Yep.
Even if she was okay with being touched.
Like I said, watch the last video. But yes. But yeah, again, that chapter was god-awful. Chapter 49 was terrible. It's just, but again, that's a lot of the like Jace and Veraska chapters. They're just bad because it's just the writing staff from Wizards telling Greg Weisman and trying to work with Greg Weisman to revert back everything that was written previously. Right. All the good stories that were written are just from those two are just being taken away. And it's done very poorly because it's almost like it was done pretty damn well the first time, and now you're half-assing getting rid of it because you want to get rid of it, and that's just how you're putting it forth.
Right. There's no real, genuine feeling way to get rid of it because the relationship that you're trying to get rid of was a genuine, real, in-depth relationship, and now you just have to quickly unravel it somehow. So how you're going to do that is by just doing it really poorly and hoping that in the end you can convince people that Vraska's a bad person, and therefore Jace will learn that she's a bad person, and then therefore they won't be together anymore.
Mm-hmm. But Liliana's the good one.
Right. Obviously.
Clearly. Duh. You're dumb for thinking she's not.
Oh my god. It's just so
tiresome.
Yes.
Yes, that's fair. Let's bring it back up a little as we talk about, first of all, something that a story I wanted to share with all of you of an enjoyable time that I had while reading this book. As we get to a section with Rat, and Rat makes a comment walking through the mansion of the House of Vess on Dominaria, and Rat says that nobody appreciates good molding anymore.
And I just go, right?
So
I'm a big lover of old, interesting houses, so that to me was a cool line.
Yeah, she even says, I wonder if it's original to the house. So appreciates good architecture, like...
And in a lot of ways, I, relate to Rat, and I'll get to how that's bad later.
Yeah, I was going to say, not all the ways. We'll get to that. Holy crap. Oh, God. Okay, but to keep it on the positive, I talked about a bad chapter. Let's talk about a good chapter. Chapter 53 was awesome. It was told from... I don't recall whose perspective it was told from, but it was, again, another Kaya, Teo, and Rat chapter. And it was great. They are talking about the fake Liliana and how she has the smoke coming out of her pendant, and Teo says that it's probably a djinn. He kind of surmises that it's a djinn. Kaya doesn't know what a djinn is, and Rat says, oh my god, Teo knows something that Kaya doesn't? Teo doesn't know anything. And Kaya's like, Rat, that's really rude. And Teo's like, no, she's right. I don't know anything. That's hilarious. That's super funny. But again, it solidifies to me something that I believe I said in part 2 of this series, where I said that Greg Weisman did a pretty damn good job on Kaya, Teo, and Rat sections, because at least Teo and Rat are complete originals to him.
Yeah. And
we've seen very little of Kaya prior to the Greg Weisman writings. So he probably had a fair bit of freedom writing as her as well, or of her as well. As opposed to all the things that we have a problem with. Jace, Vraska, Liliana, Chandra, Nissa, like all the established characters we have issues with. Characterization issues. But Greg Weisman was given the opportunity to write these characters, and he had them make such good relationships with one another.
Right.
And again, spoilers, I guess, but from Weisman's perspective, if for whatever reason he thought he was coming back ever again to write for Magic the Gathering,
I'm
which...
sure he doesn't think that now.
Right, and I'm sure I hope no one at Wizards thinks he is, because whether we want it or not is really not for this discussion, because, again, these moments were actually interesting, where you give him original characters to write and an opportunity to be a little bit freer with their interactions with one another. But if you're having him write established characters, that's a huge no-go. Don't do it, especially if you're having him write for 36 different established characters and hoping that they all get their time in or something.
Right.
But...
Oh, but also you need to know all the stuff about the old characters so that you can accurately incorporate it. And also you have to retcon most of this stuff, so...
Yeah, so do all that work for us, and we're throwing you under the bus, and good luck answering to all of our rabid, angry fans when we screw this all up as well. But there's no surprise to me that who does Liliana, again, the heroine of the book as they're trying to make her, who does she end up with? Who is she on the cover with? Teo, Kaya, and Rat. That's who she ends up with at the end of this book, because that's who Greg Weisman was the most comfortable with as characters from start to finish.
Right.
Now again, maybe that was just the writing team at Wizards that came to that decision, but it was made that much better by the fact that it was those three characters with her in the end, and not her coming back to Chandra or something where they could just continue to mess up relationships and characterization. They could give it to the characters who Greg Weisman got to write for from the start. So then we have something. We'll stop being so positive, because God knows that's not what this show's ever been about, unless you watched from when we were talking about good stories. Seriously, feel free to go watch our old stuff. We were happy often.
Yeah, watch our Ixalan videos.
Yeah, or our Kaladesh ones.
Yeah.
Aether Revolt. Almond Cat, Hour of Devastation. You know, whatever.
Great stuff.
But something that, Amy, I believe you wanted to talk about was Teyza's plan coming together with Lazav.
Oh, God.
And it really does, I guess it's more later, but we can talk about it in general. But this book had issues towards the end. But
the end, all throughout.
Mostly in this latter third, I would argue, were some of the most egregious in my estimation. But what did you want to say about Teyza and Lazav working together?
It was just really freaking cliche and done a million times, and especially by that point in the book, I just didn't care at all anymore.
Because basically, again, for those of you that haven't read it, Lazav is working with Teyza. Teyza is trying to convince Tomek, who is acting guildmaster while Kaya is gone, that Tomek should stay as acting guildmaster so that Kaya can continue going on and off world. But Kaya is the true guildmaster, so she can return for ceremonies and things like that. But Tomek will be acting guildmaster because he knows what he's doing. But Teyza will be working with Tomek. And so Teyza is manipulating Tomek so that Tomek will basically do whatever Teyza and the Triumvirate want.
Right.
And Teyza is being manipulated / worked with by Lazav. So Lazav is in charge of Teyza, who's in charge of Tomek, who's standing in for Kaya. Got that? Is that straight? I hope you understand it. Because
honestly, it's not that confusing. It's just boring. Because it's so stupid. Everybody is manipulating everybody else.
Yeah, we'll get there. That's not even the half of it, folks.
God.
That is not even the half of it. And something else that you brought up that I think is very poignant. You talked about, if it's true that Tomek was able to resist the charms of the vampire advisor,
Right.
that he's able to resist those charms and then just immediately falls for Teyza's lies. That are very, literally the whole, I hope you don't mind me saying, throughout the whole chapter, I'm reading this chapter out loud, because if you're unaware, I read the book, Amy listens in general, and then we discuss it along the way, and then obviously here as well. But the whole chapter, I'm reading it, and Teyza is saying, well, but we could do this, and Tomek's like, well, I don't really believe you. And Teyza's like, listen, you don't have to believe me, but what about if we do this? And the whole time Amy's going, no, don't, no, the whole time, which I loved. That was great.
Because it's so stupid. We've heard it so many times before, not in this book, obviously.
Not yet.
But just in like every crappy movie that you've ever seen, every bad book that you've ever read. It's just...
Yep. Okay, let's go back a bit before we get to that, because there's more to that. But before we get to that, because that's more towards the end, let's talk about Liliana and Rat and someone named Anna Iora. So first, with the fake Liliana steals Nicol Bolas's spirit gem from the real Liliana Vess. When she captures her and turns her into a mindless gardening zombie, right? Like not an actual zombie, but like just a zoned out servant. And when fighting the fake Liliana as well as Zahid the Jinn, which I didn't hate. I didn't hate that it was Zahid. I thought that was kind of cool. It harkened me back to the card. The card is cool. I liked it. That's fine. When they're in that fight, Rat picks up the spirit gem and throws it to Liliana. And Liliana catches it in one of the biggest moments of BS that I've ever read, because the whole time we have been going through this book, again, if you didn't watch parts 1 and 2, we've been going through this book and we've been saying, okay, so Liliana is terrible, right? We all know she's terrible because we've read her up to the first book of these two, of this series. Liliana's terrible. She's a bad person. Right. She's manipulated the entirety of the Gatewatch all the way up until Dominaria to help her kill all of her demons. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't think of that word. She manipulated Jace in and out of their relationship, into, during, and after their relationship, until he finally found someone who was better for him, who now for some reason isn't better for him anymore. We'll talk about that more later. She's bad. We all know she's bad, but these stories are trying to make us believe that she's not by telling us that she's not.
Right.
And by telling us, hey, guess what? We know that Liliana is a manipulative person, but she's also being manipulated.
Right.
So you should feel...
Makes it okay.
Yeah, you should feel bad for her. Because manipulative people never play the victim in order to garner your support.
No.
That's never a thing that a manipulative person has ever done. Please note the sarcasm. Please. Because I don't want you to think that anything that I'm saying is serious. That a manipulative person absolutely would play the victim to garner your support. And to garner your belief that they're not a manipulative jerk. So, what did the writing team from Wizards decide to do with this manipulative character? They decided to make her be the victim of manipulation. And use that to have you go, oh, but she's a victim, so I feel bad for her. And all the manipulation that she did was forgiven because she went, wow, is this what I've been doing to people? I'm definitely going to turn around a whole new leaf. That's how it works, right? That's, you believe me. But it's okay. Because if you still don't believe that Liliana is redeemed, what about Ugin? Ugin's a character that a lot of people respect, and that he's done great things, and he's smart, and he's not manipulative at all, right? Note the sarcasm again. But he's a strong character. He's mostly good. He has been on the side of good for a very long time. And so Ugin shows up to Liliana mentally, telepathically, through the spirit gem and says to her, hey, guess what? You can use this spirit gem, this ex machina, if you will, to unlock your true self. Okay, I guess I gotta buy it because the book says so.
You bought the book. You spent money on it. You sure did.
It's a physical copy, I swear. It's real. Yep, no, it's, yeah, she just gets this gem and she can use it to reveal her true self. And I read that and I went, oh, so that's how they're doing it. Not only throughout this whole book have they been trying to make us feel bad for her.
Not gonna work.
But now they're just like, but you can also use this egg and you'll just be a good person. And then Ugin says, again, to try to further, I guess, manipulate the reader at this point, this is the only thing I can think of. Ugin says, you can be your true self like Gideon would have wanted you to be, or wanted you to be. So we'll just take the man who you definitely loved, right, and who definitely, absolutely sacrificed himself for you, and we're going to invoke his name to remind you that you should be a good person because he died for you.
Even though you're not a good person. And
then Ugin is going to talk about him and your relationship with him as if he has any knowledge whatsoever of that relationship existing.
Nope.
When did he know about that?
Never.
When did he know that Liliana and Gideon were becoming buddy-buddy?
Nor would anyone like Ugin actually give a shit. That is such a trivial thing to him.
Yeah. The only way that would have made sense is if he had done that prior to Liliana helping Ugin stop Nicol Bolas. Because then Ugin would have just said that so that she could get to where she needed to get to so that he could stop Nicol Bolas. Like, just whatever he had to do to stop his brother from destroying the multiverse and becoming a god.
Even then it would have been out of place.
Fair. But it would have been better.
But in this situation, it's extremely out of place.
Yeah.
Instead of just still out of place.
Mm-hmm. And the only thing I wrote was like, could Ugin have maybe read her mind through the spirit gem, through the blind eternities, from the meditation route? Like, that's the only thing I can think of, and that's a long walk.
He wouldn't have bothered.
No.
He doesn't care.
That's fair. He shouldn't care. But here we are.
Just like I don't care.
There's an ex machina in this gem, Mr. Egg, spirit gem thing, that Liliana can just focus on it and poof, she's her true self. Because sure.
I'm just mad she didn't get burned up.
So.
Like the other Liliana did.
Yeah. So, we move on slightly from that, but Liliana uses the chain veil to stop Zahid, and the Onaki spirits come out of the chain veil, and they're like swirling around Zahid, and they're hurting him, and he's screaming, and Liliana's using the chain veil for all of this. And this chapter is being told from Rat's perspective of all of them. And Rat is saying things about the chain veil to Liliana that Rat would have no knowledge of. She's a little bit psychic. She says that multiple times.
She sure does say that.
She would not. What possible information would she have had about the chain veil? Like, why is she saying these things? And then, if you want to use the excuse, she's a little bit psychic, so carte blanche for her to know anything at all about the chain veil to say it to Liliana, then I'd like to ask you, how did Kaya, who was also... it was Kaya's perspective that chapter is from, and Rat was saying those things out loud. How did Kaya know, from her perspective, how did she know that they were Onaki spirits? How did she know anything about the Onaki spirits? She's just like, in her head.
Absolutely anything.
In her head, she's like, the Onaki spirits are swirling around Zahid. How do you know what they are? How do you know anything about the chain veil at all?
Yeah, because when they came out of the chain veil, they were like, Vessel, don't leave us.
Yeah, except
they weren't like, we are Onaki spirits.
No, but also...
Nice to meet you, Kaya.
But also, I'm
like,
relatively certain Liliana's the only one who can hear them. Like, they could all see them, but I'm relatively certain Liliana's the only one who can hear them talking to her like that. Just like she's the only one who can hear the Raven Man, although apparently everybody could see all the ravens, but... And anyway, once...
Even though that's not supposed to be a thing either.
And then once that fight's over, we get a chapter from the perspective of Anna Iora. And I'm going, whoa, they're giving us a chapter from the perspective of a relative of Gideon.
Yeah, it was
That's so
like his
cool.
Sister. I didn't think he had any living relatives.
Right. Could it be a child that we're not aware of? Like, where is this going? Is it his mother? There were a lot of different options. Mm-hmm. It was none of those, and instead it was the really crappy response of, it's Liliana's new name that she's given herself because the fake Liliana, it looks like she died, and so according to everyone, Liliana Vess died, and the only people who really know that she didn't are Kaya and Rat and Teo, and...
Because the imposter's dead.
Yep, and burned alive.
And it's just too bad the real one's not.
And so all the eyewitnesses tell Jace and Chandra that she's dead, and Jace watches her body burn, etc. And so Liliana chooses the name Anna, as well as Iora, which we know is Gideon's last name, Kythion Iora, but she's on Fiora, and so she convinces herself that where she's heard that name before is through being on Fiora, and that's how she came up with that name, and that's her name now. But, not only that, but in changing her name and changing who she is to become her true self, she uses the egg as promised and detaches herself from her connection to the chain veil. And the spirit gem is absorbed in the process, It doesn't turn to dust, it just like disappears in a flash of light or whatever. So it's totally possible it comes back in the future at some point, but it's gone now. Chain Veil taken by Teo in his little light orb and given to Niv Mizzet. So FYI, still have to come back to Ravnica again to see what happens with the Chain Veil. It's in Niv Mizzet's possession now, but that's the Ex Machina. Is that Liliana uses the gem, disconnects from the veil, and is now using the name Ana Iora and pretending that Liliana is dead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's like not being connected to the chain veil anymore doesn't undo all the terrible shit that you've done in your life.
Good save.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Good save. Then we go back to tying up the rest of the people's stories poorly. Mostly back to Ravnica, but also to the Gatewatch. This is a long video, I apologize. Thank you for sticking with us. But by God, was there a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Vraska, Ral, and Kaya come back and attest to finishing their tasks. Kaya lies, Vraska lies, and Ral doesn't lie, but is the only one who doesn't say, or who says that he didn't accomplish his task. Everybody else lies and says that they did accomplish their task, but they didn't.
How telling is it? Let me ask this question to the void. I want to hear what comes out.
Sure.
How telling is it that the heroine of this story is Liliana Vess? The antagonists are, I guess, Vraska and Jovan Bon and Tezzeret and
that's kind of it, really.
Lazav.
Yeah, oh yeah, Lazav big time. Yeah, fair point.
How telling is it that when this convening happens, where we now see where these planeswalkers are at in their task of accomplishing the murders that they were asked to commit. But how telling is it that this book is just rewarding and rewarding and rewarding and rewarding people who lie and manipulate, and the people who get fucked over time and time again are the people who tell the truth and have genuine relationships.
Yeah, Ral was messed up at the end of this. He just was. Like, he looked awful. He had shaved his head. He was, like, super depressed and injured, and he almost got kicked out as acting guildmaster and was, like, he disappointed Niv Mizzet, and then he just goes home to be with Tomek, which is great, but that's it.
Tomek is off doing
guild business,
doing his errands, because now he's Taze's errand boy again. Why any of it? None of it makes sense, because it's all grasping at any tiny straw it possibly can at this point to retcon good story. So you know how you retcon good story? By writing bad story and then keep on keeping on with all of the shit. You just will not stop. You just keep clinging to every bad narrative and characterization that comes out of it. You just clutch it tighter. And then when your audience sits there and goes all over the internet and says how terrible you are for writing the words that you wrote and doing the things that you did to their beloved characters, you don't even do anything.
I mean,
because time and time again, it's just, well, these characters are good because we say they're good, and these characters are bad because we say they're bad. Not because of anything real, because all of the real stuff is stuff we're trying to wipe away.
Ignore the joke I was going to make. Not important. Not as good as what Amy was talking about. So ignore me. Ignore that completely. But Amy brings up a good point. And that's people talking about this book on the internet. So let's talk about it. We haven't talked about it because it hadn't come up. Let's talk about Chandra and Nissa. And I'm going to start with a bit of a controversial statement, but not as controversial as you might think, but still controversial based on the majority of opinions that I've seen out there. But please bear with me and allow me to explain. There was a paragraph from the book that was shared online shortly after this book was released that was used as damning evidence of queerbaiting and the dissolving of the relationship that was being built between Chandra and Nissa. And I will agree that this book did a very good job, in a crappy way, of dissolving the relationship between Chandra and Nissa. It shouldn't have done it. It was stupid that they did it, but they did it. It was definitely their goal to do it.
Yes, the words were very deliberate.
Yeah, absolutely deliberate. But I will say that I think that taking that one chapter or paragraph or two paragraphs or whatever that were put on the internet and using those as so many people's rationale for not reading this book at all is a little bit out of context for the rest of the chapter, which is still a very crappy chapter. The retconning of that relationship was done super poorly. But that one paragraph or two is not indicative of how poorly it was done. And so I think just using those two paragraphs to send out to the entire community so that a large number of people could read those two chapters, go, what the hell is this? Thank God I didn't buy that book. That's a little bit unfair. Excuse me. And that's not to say that you should go read it because you'll be pleasantly surprised. No, you'll be surprised, but it will not be a pleasant feeling.
No.
But the rest of that chapter did no more favors than that one paragraph did. So maybe I guess you could say that those two paragraphs did a good job of giving you the general gist of what that chapter was trying to do in its entirety, but there was a lot more to it. And I don't think that that chapter was an accurate representation of, or that paragraph, sorry, or two, were accurate representations of the chapter in its entirety in what it tried to do. And so if you have the opportunity...
It maybe wasn't. I do agree it was taken out of context a little bit. But like I said, I think the words were very deliberate. It was not the kind of thing where you could sit there and say, okay, well, it wasn't really queer baiting because, well, it was out of context, and so that part of it was bad, but really the rest of it was fine. No, it was not that.
Nope.
It was definite queer baiting.
Agreed.
And it was done to, I feel, to hurt those of us who had a connection to this relationship and throw it out the window just like the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
And if not worse than the rest of them because it was not a heterosexual relationship.
And if you've been following along with JaAR, you'll understand the meme of the show of I love a Johnny, Amy loves Nissa, and we're at each other's throats about it often. But allow me to say first, between this book and this book, Nissa got shafted. Shafted as a character. This is the end of the Nicol Bolas arc of stories, the Gatewatch arc of stories. Who were the founding members of the Gatewatch?
Right.
Because I'll give you a hint. None of them are on this cover.
Right.
None of them. Liliana is on this cover and is not a founding member of the Gatewatch. She is not. She was the fifth, but she was not the founding member of the Gatewatch. The founding members of the Gatewatch were from Oath of the Gatewatch. They were Jace, Chandra, Gideon, and Nissa. And this book focused on talking about Gideon because he was already dead, but he got a great send-off at the end of this book, as best as that book could have given him.
And then this book went on to bastardize his memory. You know.
But they did their best.
Like you do.
Yep, but they did their best. Jace got an ending in this book, Liliana got a big ending in this book, and Chandra got an ending in this book. And Nissa got to go back to Zendikar and have Chandra show up, and Nissa said like 5 lines to her, and then she was gone again. Yeah. How is that an ending for that character? What? Vivian Reed had more of a presence as a green planeswalker than Nissa did in this book.
Right.
By a lot. Possibly more in that book. Because there was that moment where she met up with Gideon and Ajani, I think. Maybe Gideon, Ajani, and Teferi. Something like that. Where they were going to fight and she appeared and she was like, I'm going to go kill that guy. And they were like, whoa, let's relax. And she's like, okay, I'll listen to you, complete stranger, even though I have a bloodlust to have to kill that guy. But I'll totally listen to you. You're definitely a person that, out of nowhere, I should absolutely just listen to and acquiesce to. The relationship, but again, it's another relationship from prior to this novel and this novel being written that they completely retconned for one reason or another. Again, I posit my conspiracy theory, and I'm fully aware that it is, that this woman looks a lot better on art and on covers and on promotional material than a Gorgon with tentacles for hair. And so it's a lot better to have her as your heroine than to have Vraska as your heroine. It's a lot better.
Sex sells, I guess.
And it's a lot better for folks who are not as accepting of LGBTQ plus relationships to get along with, not really talking much about Tomek and Rahl in these stories.
All right.
And kind of giving them the shaft as well at the end, and getting rid of Chandra and Nissa as a possibility at all. The only relationship that we saw heavily in this book was Jace and Vraska, but at least that was a heterosexual relationship. And by at least, I mean that's their opinion, seemingly, as I am putting forth.
And now it seems at the end of this book that that's just not even a relationship that exists anymore either, so.
Correct. That's one that they're trying to get. The line literally says, Jace is saying, his relationship with her probably won't work. Yeah, because Liliana's going to come back and you want them to be together. Like, just don't lie to us. It's so annoying. Say it at the beginning of the book or something. Like, say, like, by the way, we don't want these two together. We want Liliana and Jace back together. They're a good couple. They're not. But if that's what you're going to go with, don't lie to us and gaslight the fans and queer bait everybody. Like, it's just disrespectful.
They have to do that.
I know.
Because guess what? The only reason why they're giving all of that to the abuser on the cover of the book is because that's what they want to keep perpetuating. That's the kind of thing that they want to keep feeding into.
Yep.
And, there's only so many times we can say the name Nick Hellman.
I'd really rather never have to say it again. So,
right?
Wizards could do the right thing. Yeah, don't forget, she was forsaken by her friends, Amy.
Yes.
Don't forget that. She was forsaken.
That she was a manipulative bitch to every single one of them and deserves to be the one who burned.
No, she was forsaken by them.
Right.
Anyway,
She's a good person now because the spirit gem.
Yeah, it was the Ex Machina. She just held it, and she's better now, right? I mean, you guys understand.
I got it.
You have to get it. The book said so. It says so in this book. She used the gem. She's better now. You can't argue about it. Nope. She's better. Deal with it. Sorry. I couldn't keep a straight face. Okay, let's continue talking about the bad of this book. Because this book continues to end.
Oh, there's still more.
Oh, yeah. Because as Amy mentioned, everyone manipulating everyone.
Oh, yes.
And that's I think, how we're going to end this, right? Oh, and then, a little bit more after that. Okay. But we're almost done. I promise. I'm sorry, but I promise.
We really, truly are sorry.
Here are a list of some of the manipulations going on in this book. You have Lazav and Teza, as we talked about. You have Teza and Tomek. You had the vampire and Tomek. You have Lazav and Rat. We'll get to that in a second. You have Tezzeret and Ral, which we saw. And you have Tezzeret and Lazav. And Lazav and Tezzeret.
And ironically, Liliana, the master of manipulation, is like the one who's not manipulating anyone in this story.
Because, Amy, you don't get it. She's good now.
The spirit gem.
That, unfortunately, I don't know that will ever not be funny. And it shouldn't be funny because it's really crappy.
Truthfully, it's the opposite of funny. But
what can you do? I didn't write them. But the Lazav and Rat thing boggles my damn mind. There's a chapter in this book.
I can't even with this.
There's a chapter in this book, and I say chapter. There was a chapter in this book that was like the top half of the page is the chapter. In fact, hold this for a second. Maybe I can find it while I'm talking about it. Not that chapter in particular, but if you take a look, I don't know how well you can see it, but you see the chapter number and the name of the person whom the chapter is about. So that's there like that. So take a look at approximately how much of the page is taken up by text. That's standard for every chapter in this book. But as you can see, text continues on this page for the chapter. Imagine, if you will, that this is a chapter, and then this is the start of another chapter. So this chapter here ends at the bottom of the page. That is a chapter, thank you. That is a chapter that was told from the perspective of Atkos Tar, someone who we met at the start of that chapter,
yeah,
and never physically heard from again after the end of that chapter. And yet, this book had this big gotcha moment. Oh my God, you're gonna blow your damn mind apart all over the walls when you hear that you know who Atkos Tar is. Well, first of all, from the chapter you find out he is a male vampire assassin. Okay, no drinking blood at Atkos Tar because they'll know it was a vampire. You just have to kill somebody. And so sure enough, later on, Dovin Bond, spoilers, at the end of this book, Dovin Bond gets killed. But not by Veraska, who was supposed to kill him.
Not by Chandra, who thought she killed him.
But by Atkos Tar, the male vampire assassin. But wait, who is Atkos Tar, you may ask? Who is this vampire assassin? Is it the vampire advisor that we were talking about earlier? Because it's the only vampire we've mentioned.
Sense.
Is it Soren? Because it's another male vampire that we're aware of through magic canon?
And he's a gigantic dick, so why not?
No, it is a female human named Arathia Shakta, better known as Rat. Holy crap!
That we all actually loved. Again.
But
being tossed out the window again.
But she has a secret, and her secret is that she has dual identities. And the second identity is Atkos Tar, that person that we've definitely seen so many times in the book that by the time we find out that Rat is Atkos Tar, all of us readers can go, oh my God, I knew it. Or, oh my God, I never would have guessed. No. You wouldn't have been able to guess because they gave you half a page. I showed you how much space of text it was.
And because it makes no goddamn sense.
It really doesn't. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. But again, I know, I feel it in my bones that between the writing team at Wizards and Greg Weisman, they're sitting there going, oh my God, everybody's going to blow their minds when they find out that Rat was a male vampire assassin all along.
No. They're going to be like, what the fuck did you ruin this time?
A male vampire assassin whom Lazav has been manipulating since she was born.
Yeah.
Since she was born.
Obviously, And then when she turned 16, she touched the spindle, and then she fell asleep, and the prince had to come and wake her up.
Yep, and the prince was Teo, I guess.
Yeah.
But so, yes, Lazav has been manipulating Rat since she was born. Now, this moment could have been amazing. They could have done something where they took Rat as a character, and every once in a while they were like, well, where's Rat? Where'd she go? Why is she not here? Let's go look for her. Oh man, now she's back. And then 2 chapters later you find out someone's dead somewhere. And then, whatever. Big reveals like this, you know what I want to do when I read a big reveal like this in a novel, especially a novel this thick? You know what I want to do when I read that in a good novel? I want to go back and I want to read the novel again. Because I want to know where all the moments were that I could have been clued into the fact that she had this other identity. Or that someone was Lazav instead of the person that they said that they were. And that person was using At-Kostar as her code word to awaken her and convince her that she was a male vampire assassin and go do some killing. But you know what I can't do? Go back in this book and have any of that happen. Not because I don't like the book, although that's fair, but because there were no hints. Right. None.
And
none at all.
And not only that, it just... the fact that it's just kind of tossed on to the end just really shows that it was just their way of going, oh shit, we've got some loose ends that we can't figure out how to close off somehow. So, anybody have any great ideas? No?
Yeah, let's turn this little invisible girl into a male vampire assassin.
Yeah, they just had no way to actually make anything make sense. So they were just like, well, we'll say this. That'll work, right?
Yeah, a shapeshifter did it.
Yeah.
Through manipulation, because everybody's manipulating everybody. It was
so bad.
Legitimately, for about a half a second, I was like, whoa! And then I was like, wait, because I thought about it for any period of time besides the moments it took me to read the words on the page. A male vampire assassin, everybody. That's who Rat is. Look at her. Doesn't she look like a male vampire assassin to all of you? She sure does look like that to me. Nope. And the book gave no indication that she was gone ever, except for that one time that Teo was part of the chapter, and then it was At-Kostar's chapter, and then it was Lazav's chapter. And then in Lazav's chapter, he spells out for you, well, in this moment, which we know was Teo's chapter, that's when I activated her. And in this moment, when it was At-Kostar's chapter, that was after I activated her. So, like, they just explain everything to you. There's nothing for you to go back.
The sugar bowl thing
was a hand.
What? No.
Anyway, but at the end of it all...
You suck.
Yeah, but at the end of it all, Dovin Bond, an actually cool character, is dead.
Or at least he used to be, before these stories.
Yep. But Lazav blinded him, and then Vraska cut his hand off, and then Rat
tried to kill him,
and then Rat slit his throat, and he's dead now. And Lazav has his other hand, which he's going to use to manipulate, Vraska into letting him be in charge of the Golgari. Because, again, I guess to set up further Ravnica shenanigans that better not happen for another very, very, very long time. We have Lazav working with Tezzeret to try to take over all 10 guilds of Ravnica. And we find out in a very interesting bit of narrative structure, we find out, as we know, they're working on the Golgari, because I just said they will be able to manipulate Vraska with the hand of Dovin Bond. They have the Dimir, clearly, because Lazav is in charge of the Dimir, and Lazav's part of this plan. They have the Orzhov, because Lazav to Teza to Tomek to Kaya. as we discussed, which makes perfect sense. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it for more than like 5 seconds. And then they say that they also have the Simic. And don't forget, we've got the Simic. Now, we don't see how they have the Simic, but I liked that. I'm cool with that. You showed us 2 of them. We know about the third is Demir just by default. And then you say you have the Simic. I believe you, because you did the 2 others, and you showed us those 2 others. And I'm sure that that Simic thing would come into play in the future when another guild is trying to fight off the Demir and or Tezzeret or whatever, and that Simic can come in and be like, oh, we're going to help, and then betray them in the last second, which we as readers will know already. And we will feel smarter for knowing that ahead of time. It'll be like the horror movie. Don't go in there. Don't go in there. Don't trust them. They're going to betray. Oh, they betrayed you. You should. Come on. We knew. Like, that's okay with me. I don't mind that. I like that they threw that in there. They're like, well, we have the Simic too. You don't hear a lot about the Simic or a lot from the Simic. So I like that. I like that little bit of story there. I thought that was pretty good.
I thought it was meh.
Oh, fair enough.
I thought it was lacking just in the way that everything else was.
Okay. That's fair. I'm gonna brush past this very quickly. There's the Ana Iora chapter towards the end. I don't really want to talk about this a lot anymore, but there's the Ana Iora chapter towards the end, and God, is it confusing as hell. When Liliana is referring to herself as Liliana, as Ana Iora, it depends on what she's talking about. Is she saying that Ana would do one thing, Liliana would do another thing? Then when, as Amy mentioned to me before we started, like, Kaya meets up with them, and Kaya, Rat, and Teo meet up with Liliana / Ana, and now they're saying, like, well, that's not an Ana thing. No, that's definitely Liliana, or that's not Liliana anymore. Now she's Ana. Like, it's so confusing, and you already did this with the fake Liliana, where the real Liliana is talking about the fake Liliana, but she's fully calling herself Liliana, calling the fake one Liliana Vess, but then when she's referring to herself to other people, she's calling herself Liliana Vess.
Right.
Shut up. It's so confusing.
Book cover and the... God.
Yeah.
There's just so much, like, that is something that's like the only consistent through line between this book and the other books. Like, the only thing that was consistent from start to finish with these novels was that the way that if people had more than one name, they kept on throwing all of them at you at once.
Or even just multiple names in a scene in general. Not
and
even
then they would, like,
one
create
person.
more versions to keep throwing them at you. It just didn't make any sense. It's like, just pick a lane and stay in it.
Yep.
Like, if you want to have doppelgangers, you can do the doppelganger thing. But give one of them one name and the other one the other name, and then we'll understand who's who.
And keep it consistent,
It's
for the love
not
of God.
that hard. This is such an easy... The doppelganger thing has been done and done and done and done. And yet you can't do it. Just like you can't do anything else.
It was very, very...
Except for poorly retconned.
It was confusing and exhausting. And finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about is the prologue, which Amy pointed out, which I love. I was like, now the prologue. And then I turned the page and I'm like, it's chapter 82 or whatever it was. And Amy's like, well, what is it? The prologue or chapter 82? And if the prologue were multiple chapters, okay, maybe. Nope. The prologue is one chapter and it's the last chapter and they numbered it after saying it was the prologue. Sure.
It's either
I
a
guess.
chapter or it's the prologue.
Whatever. That's like the least offensive thing this book did, to be fair. But
it's not, because it's the end. And it's so friggin' basic. Just get anything right. Anything.
And I will say, there was
so frustrating.
The prologue had Kaya, Rat, Teo together with Ana, Liliana, at this little cafe or whatever, and they're laughing together and they're joking, and they're going to be the new team, those 4. And Kaya, it's from her perspective, and she is reminiscing about the events, which is really, literally, this is the moment where Greg Weisman summarizes this book, he summarizes this book, and he does it at the end in like a sappy way, because you're supposed to look at that and remember. remember back to that book and to this book and to remember it fondly in your heart. And Kaya talks about how she's crying about it, like she had a good cry and she thought about all those things. And that's touching. It actually truly is touching.
Or it would be.
But the only thing you're thinking in that moment is, by God, end it. Just end the book. Turn it off. Make the ride stop.
Yeah.
And so any
You've
other...
already thrown up like 15 separate times.
Any other author who wrote 2 books, thick books, for a company, they were contracted to do it. He mentions in his thank yous or acknowledgments at the end that it was a lot of work for him to do, and that, you know, he was on the deadline and it was stressful. To me, that was the moment at the end of the book that he wanted to be a sappy, reminiscing moment about the end of the book, about the end of both novels, the duo of novels. And it was supposed to be that cathartic release for him as the author through Kaya, and he was reflecting on those books and what he did. And for us, at least, for you, if it was different, we would love to hear from you. But for us, at least, that fell so flat because we just went through all the other nonsense that we just talked about in this very long episode of JaAR.
Yes.
I have ideas. I have ideas for what this show is going to be. I say I. We've talked about it. We have ideas. Sorry.
It's okay.
We've talked about it, and we have ideas of where this show is going in the future. First things first, stay tuned until next week. Next week, we will definitely be back with another JaAR, as long as we can find time to film it, which we should be able to, but we have a plan for next week's JaAR. We are going to talk about, overall, what we thought of the entire book, although we've pretty much talked about that already. But I want to do a little bit of a, where are they now? Because this is the end of the Gatewatch arc, of the Nicol Bolas arc, and there are Planeswalkers here, characters who deserve to be talked about. And as of the release of this episode, we have not seen any of them since. Excuse me. Because we saw the Kenrith twins and Garruk and Elspeth and Ashiok, but we have not seen anyone, except for technically Ashiok, I guess, who was featured in either of these books. So I want to do a Where Are They Now as best we can to talk about where these characters ended up, for better or worse. Okay. It's just where the book says they are and what that means for that character's future. If that's something that you're interested in, we would love for you to subscribe. That button is down below. We try to do these videos. In fact, again, we have ideas of how we're going to do positive JaARs again.
Yeah.
It's how we started. It's what we want. We have ideas. Between now and the end of the year, we have ideas for positive JaARs. We are still planning on doing the Wildered quest. Stay tuned for that as well. I can't promise you when that will come out because we want time to read it and properly analyze it and write our notes and etc. to bring that to all of you. So stay tuned for that as well. If and when that Theros story that we were promised comes out, we will review that as well. But do not hold your breath. Not for our end, for their end.
Right.
Don't hold your breath. But for now, I need water. So that is going to be the end of this episode of JaAR. Sincerely, thank you all so much for watching, especially if you hung out through this whole thing because, my God, this was stressful.
If you hung out through this whole video, I mean, if you hung out through this whole arc, if you hung out through the JaARs from this novel and the previous novel, and I mean, just the mess that is Magic Story at this point. We appreciate that you sat through all of this negativity in the hopes, just like we had the hope, that at one point we would get to something better.
But here we are.
So the Wildered quest.
The Wildered quest, and like I said, please stay tuned. We have plans. I don't want to announce it yet, but we have plans. I hope you like it. I'm actually genuinely looking forward to it. So I really hope that you
I am
all...
too.
Yes, thank
Big
you.
time.
Really, big time. So please stay tuned. We want to do these things. It'll be fun for us. We hope it'll be fun for you. That's the idea, because this is not what we want. It's not what most people want. But we set out to do this. We wanted to do this. We want to know where these characters are going to be, because if they ever fix it, we need to know what got us there to begin with. So thank you for bearing with us and or just straight up joining us. Please give us any and all thoughts that you have on our review, on the book itself, on the state of Magic Story in general, on a guess as to what we might have planned. I'm certain nobody will get it, but it's possible. And if you get it, we'll tell you that you're right.
Yeah.
Because why not? But so feel free to guess in the comments below.
Yes.
That is going to be the end of this episode of JaAR. Thank you so much for watching. Sincerely, please feel free to like, to comment, to subscribe. It helps us out a lot. We have 2 other channels. We have Video Games for All and we have Gluten Free for All. Amy is doing some amazing things on Gluten Free for All. You should definitely go check it out. And honestly, Video Games for All, in my opinion, have some of the best videos that you're not watching. Sincerely. And if you are watching them, you're amazing. Thank you. But if you're not watching them, you should. They're incredible. Amy's doing an amazing job there as well. You should definitely go watch them. They are super entertaining and they're just getting better. Trust me, we filmed them already. So you should definitely go on over to that channel and check those videos out. I highly encourage it. Please stay tuned to this one as well. We have more things coming, JaAR and others.
And
I was going to get there. I was. My voice is destroyed. I need water desperately, but we sat here through all of this. You sat here through all of this because we care. It's important. We care about these characters, good or bad, poorly written or written well, because it's a way for all of us to join you in showing off your...
#Vorthos Pride.
Super important. We love it. We love you all. Please stay tuned. Like I said, we have big plans, so we hope that you enjoyed. Any and all feedback you have, please let us know down in the comments below. But that has been another episode of JaAR here on Geek for All. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.